clarity is not a destination. People, including myself, thought happiness, all these things were at a destination. Like, oh, once I get clear in my life, everything will fall into place. No, because you're probably foggy in some other area, whether it's your finances, whether it's you talking to yourself or putting yourself first, your career, your relationships with people. Each one of those is something that you have to work on.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Kristen Donnelly of Abbey Research. And here at Abbey Research, we deeply believe that curiosity can change the world because, it's the only thing that actually ever has. The process of asking questions and listening to the answers expands our worldview and creates a deeper human experience than any of us could have ever had. And this series is in service of that. It's called Welcome to My World. And I get the unbelievable privilege of chatting to folks different than me from all over the place. And literally, since everyone is different than me, every conversation is fascinating. Today's guest is absolutely no different. I am honored to be joined by my friend, Crystal Fox, who is the host of the podcast, Crystal Bald, Clarity of It All, which I've also had the privilege of being on. Crystal and I met on Clubhouse. And one of the things that really got my attention was she talked about finding her voice with a $25 microphone. And so that is what I've asked her here to talk about today, the process of podcasting, the process of finding your voice, and the process of reinventing yourself in not your 20s, essentially. And how do we keep living lives and all of those other things. Crystal, oh my gosh, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a long time coming, and I can't believe it's been almost a year since you've been on my podcast.
Oh my God, yeah, it's like May, wasn't it?
Yes, it's so close.
Oh my gosh, so but also like how many lives have we lived since the last time we talked on a microphone?
22, exactly 22.
At least. So let's kick it off. Can you tell the folks the story of your podcast?
Oh my goodness, yes. And anyone who has not listened to a podcast, please pick one up. You can listen literally anywhere nowadays, and there's millions of them. With that being said, I was someone who, and I'm a storyteller, so I love to take it back. And I too have lived many lives before meeting Kristen. And one of them was just really growing up without my parents. And it was extremely hard for me because I didn't understand the life that I was in and why I just lived in envy a lot of times. That, oh my goodness, everyone has their parents. And of course, we live in the world of perfect Instagram feeds. And then to take it one further, you see all the movies. And since I didn't have an active role, a lot of times I played out, you could say, my fantasies of having a family through TV. So I spent pretty much my life knowing I was wanting to have that family that I was just longing for so much. The connection I had with my mother was like a best friend. She probably told me way too much. And I was 13 when I lost her to her addiction. And it took me a while to even talk. It was really back in November when I started to open up that my family, did suffer from their addictions. One of them being alcohol. But then I found out in my 20s that it was much more than alcohol, but I was so young and you just don't know about stuff like that. So there was a lot of mental health issues, a lot of abuse growing up, but I just longed for that mother-daughter, that unconditional love, you could say. So I just sat there and that was my pinpoint. I wanted to be successful. I wanted to make sure that I didn't have to long for anything financially. So I really put my head down and kept the ball running. With that being said, I jumped into plus size fashion. I worked retail for over a decade. And I'm always someone who is constantly wants to grow. So I want to move up. I want, this will get me this opportunity and, I'll be able to have a kid, but also struggling through my 20s. I spent most of my time making sure I was not going to be a single mother by taking every precaution necessary. And to only find out that, of course, I was struggling with PCOS, and there are people who can have children really easy with PCOS. But in my case, that was not the answer. Early on, and I met my husband, I met Marcus when I was 24, and we have been together now for 11 years, which is absolutely amazing. And I love him to death. But even more so, we just expected, like, you have those dating questions like, oh, how many kids you want? And you kind of plan out your life. I think in my head, I thought if you planned it out, it was going to happen exactly that way. And I know you all are probably laughing as I say this, because we all know that that is not the case whatsoever. So, we had experienced 2 miscarriages, and it was extremely, extremely hard, but I still had hope and kept in my head, like, this is going to happen when the world becomes perfect, it's going to happen. When I'm perfectly ready, it's going to happen. I put all these destinations to my happiness. So it was kind of far out to reach. And I stuck my head down and I kept working. I mean, I was working all the time. I remember just in 1 hour, Marcus counted 21 phone calls that I took. 21. Yes, that's how available I was to the company I was working for because of the career options I had. So I had a change in management, and I think we've all worked for that boss where you probably cringing a little bit, like in your stomach right now, and you're like, oh yeah, I remember her. That's what happened to me. It was a peer that actually stepped above, and I thought it was going to be a good situation. Now, my second miscarriage did happen at the same job, so they were well aware of my fertility issues and that I wanted to obviously have a family. So I was trying to get the opportunities, but also be stationed somewhere so I could have good access to good doctors. Well, I got the ultimatum of a lifetime, which was to choose between a family or career. For another woman to say that to me was gut wrenching, like a slap in my face. How dare you? And she definitely had her own reasoning behind it, I think personally, but she projected it all on me and said, you need to choose and we need an answer by the end of today. Now, I had moved for this company multiple times. I had traveled around the US training teams. It was my passion. And especially being plus size and having PCOS, like I found my tribe per se. Like I found my fashionistas and, all these caring women that were equally inspiring. And so for this woman to do this to me was, oh my goodness. I remember crying before every shift. So after a year, I just was done. I was sick of it. And again, I know we've all had that point, but it was consuming me. Like I changed as a person. So I had decided to leave. Now, I wish I would still be there had the circumstances been different. So leaving and then going to the corporate world where you're in a cubicle this big, and I'm used to seeing hundreds of people. There's sometimes I would see 1,300 people in a day and know most of them because of the conversations, and I would see the kids grow up, the divorces, the marriages, the works with my clients, and I missed it. But with that being said, I then was just like the same 9 people every single day, and I felt like my identity just within that shift was already trickling away. Like I wasn't that boss babe, that was doing everything. I was just kind of doing, the shuffling of the paperwork stuff that didn't inspire me. And it was only 2 months after, and it was in the same day, I found out that I was pregnant and I was losing my third. And at this point in my life, I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. I suffered the worst postpartum with this miscarriage, and the hormones that it takes on and the thoughts that were going on in my head. I call it the dark age, really the 6 to 8 month period after. And I expected the world that I had just poured into, because I'm that girl. I'll just keep giving till I have nothing. And I wanted my husband to fix me. I wanted him to pick up my broken pieces, and I wanted to feel happy again. But in that moment, no one was coming to save me. And Mel Robbins is the best person. I always rely on this because she says, no one's coming to save you. And I'm like, excuse me? Like, I loved and I picked up so many people in my entire life and gave everything I had. And in this moment, the darkest moment, there's no one picking me up. And in this dark age is when I was listening to podcasts at work via cubicle. And I would listen to a lot of humor or different inspirational ones to really get me going and just give me a little chuckle. I'm someone who loves to laugh, and it just was like my little light. So I was like, you know what, Marcus, I should start my own podcast. Like, I should do this. And it was a $25 Amazon order, literally this mic. If you're watching on YouTube, this is it. And I call him Mike. He's just MIC, and he has stayed with me since. But once I started being able to, and at this point, I was in a closet. A lot of podcasters, you start off in a closet because you're so worried about all the sounds that your house can make, all your neighbors, all the animals. So you like shove yourself in a small closet, and it's just you and this mic. And it's the most vulnerable thing you will ever do in your life. I will tell you that, because it's just you. So I laughed at myself. I would say things and fumble over them. And I didn't know really what I wanted to do with the podcast. I just knew I wanted to talk about the things that had already inspired me in life that I was longing for. So that's really where it started with the podcast. And Mr. Mike over here, it was, and I can't tell you, such a dark time that I needed anything. Now, I did seek talk therapy, and there was a lot of things that were, getting me to open up, but the podcast took the cake, hands down. Talking about body positivity, which I loved, and just getting to be me. And then I feel like it's just evolved over the seasons. And I literally just wrapped up season 3 last week, and I'm just so excited because I have gotten to meet amazing people. And talk about your tribe, right? When you literally internalize all the pain, you shut yourself out from the world. It was so good to meet humans that were talking about mental health, who were talking about how we can grow as humans, and weren't just stuck in this like negative Nancy ways every single time. So for me, I mean, podcasts, I feel like saved me. It has really connected me to the people I needed to hear. And I remember reading, I have a journal, and I love journaling. I always talk about it. But what I love the most is that I go back a year later. So where are we at? Going to the new year, I'm reading all these journal prompts, and I was just like, God, tell me where I'm supposed to be. Like, please put me around the people. Tell me, give me a sign. I think it was one of those moments where it was just like, am I doing what's right? And then all of a sudden, these people were coming into my lives, and they were messages that I felt like I needed to hear. So that's what podcasting also has done. And I've met people from all over the world I would have never thought, and I can now work from my cubicle and still talk to a ton of people from everywhere, despite. And I think also, Kristen, meeting you and us having that childless, child-free space was so important. I didn't think as a woman that I could ever find happiness in not having a child. I didn't think that was plausible. I just figured every single woman, we longed for this happiness that we put into the family aspect. And, even when we talk about partners, finding a partner, it's always, find your other half, find the rest of you, as if, excuse me, as if you're not whole right now. So how could I ever put my happiness anywhere else than into today, into right now? Like, that's what success truly looks like for me. And in shifting and talking to everyone, I realized that 20-year-olds were making decisions to not have children. Like, I focused on my career and doing this, and I think I about hit the floor. I was like, if I could go back and tell my 20s self, like, hey girl, do you, and everything will come as needed. And I think that was the biggest part, and that warms my heart. So I'm glad that we're opening spaces again to have the conversation that it is okay, and it's okay to make that decision, and then it's okay to change your mind. That's the biggest part.
Yeah, for Crystal and I and a couple other wonderful women hosted a room on Clubhouse for a little while, and Crystal and I are going to start doing it again for childless and child-free women. And the exploration of those words was also really interesting, and how people, like, I didn't realize that there was that there were emotional attachments to either one of those labels. I use them interchangeably. And it was fascinating for myself. It was fascinating to hear different people say like, no, I'm absolutely not childless. I am child free. I'm like, oh, okay. I never thought about it that way. So, and it was great because you and I come from very different reasons that we don't have kids and different motivations. And it was great to hold space for the anger as well as the hope. And like we ended a lot of the rooms with like, what's the best thing about being child free right now? And it was always like, I'm eating snacks at like 8:30 at night and I have not had to give another human being a bath. Like this is like, I say all the time, I accomplish quite a lot because I have no kids, no pets, or no plants. Like the only thing I have to keep alive is me. And so it allows quite a lot of time for doing things that other people look at me and they're like, oh my God, you are like so hyper busy. I'm like, I'm not. All of that time that you dedicate to keeping something else alive, I dedicate to these other things. So yeah, I mean, like you answered every single one of my questions that I was going to ask you about a podcast and about like why it's important to you, which doesn't surprise me because you are such a good storyteller. But I want to circle back to the idea of the tribe and the importance of that, because I know we've talked about that in the past, that like sometimes people just come into your life and you're like, I have no idea why you're here. Like we should not have ever met, but I'm really, really grateful for you. So when and I know as well, you balance some of your episodes are just you talking and some are interviews. So how do you know, is it like a gut feeling that you want this person on the podcast? Like, how do you determine who's going to be a guest?
That's actually a very good question. A lot of my beginning guest work is the connection. The connection for me was huge because I'm exposing, although I've decided to expose my mental health and the journey that I'm on and what I've had to go through, there's still, especially at the beginning, there was a lot of tenderness there. So I had to trust people who really came to me and wanted to be on the podcast and wanted to share their story. And it was Clubhouse. Honestly, Clubhouse was such a saving grace to just hear people and, see their little photo. So for me, it's really the connection piece. It's what they've had to go through. And I call it that foggy period because we go through multiple foggy periods. It's not just one experience that people talk about. They have many, but they share the one that hit home. Like that moment where you have to literally strap on your boots and you have to get up and you have to say, I'm saving me today. Like I'm putting myself first. Those are the people that I have placed around me and that are always asking questions and wanting to evolve. I think anything that's redundant to me, whether it's podcasting the same thing over and over again, or anything in my life, anything that's redundant, I get so bored, I just kind of shut down. So I love hearing what actually worked for people because you do not see it when you're doom scrolling. They're not like, hey, had a mental breakdown today and oh, but I got this coach purse, so everything is going to be okay. No, these are the people diving in and saying, I couldn't eat. I couldn't move my body. My husband had to carry me. And I had my daughter and the circumstances that they were put in, or fighting through cancer after going through a back injury. So I think we're actually hearing what people go through and they're giving us the tips and tools that we can put into our lives to say, hey, this is how, when it came to Madube, it was definitely eating certain foods helped her, but they had tried everything under the sun for her. And then she went to more of like holistic eating and got a different kind of doctor. And she had to do what was right for her. And it wasn't a diet conversation. It was a survival conversation. And that to me was different because I didn't want to sit there and put the diet culture out there when it came to talking about natural foods. But she did it because she needed to stay alive. I mean, she moved literally back to Africa to do all of these. So each person, I mean, even me and you discussing, clarity is not a destination. People, including myself, thought happiness, all these things were at a destination. Like, oh, once I get clear in my life, everything will fall into place. No, because you're probably foggy in some other area, whether it's your finances, whether it's you talking to yourself or putting yourself first, your career, your relationships with people. Each one of those is something that you have to work on. And there's going to be foggy moments 5 years from now that we're going to have to work on. So it's not just the destination, but it's sitting there and starting to ask yourself the questions and starting to get clear with yourself, which we have not really been taught how to, when to, or any of those things. But because each person had brought their story, I was then able to start asking myself questions like, clarity isn't just a destination. I'm going to work in this area and then I'll come back to this one. Or looking at natural food as like a survival. I was like, oh, wait, there's actually these great recipes that I'm getting from people. So each person, when you think about the community, really helps in bringing a piece of clarity because they bring their own story, they bring their own experience, and you can't deny someone else's experience, how they have gone through something.
Yeah, it only becomes problematic when we decide that our solution is ubiquitous for everybody. If we can create circumstances where we're all just bringing our solutions to the table and everybody can pick what works for them. The issue is when it's like, in order to do this, you have to do this. And that's so mostly false, which is another rabbit trail that we can fall down. And I am conscious of your time and my and the time of what's going on, because I know you've got to get to work. We're talking very early in the morning for you. So Crystal, we're going to hit pause on this conversation and continue it another time, because we could talk and have talked for hours. So I would love, where can folks find you? Remind them of the title of the podcast and where else they can find you.
Yeah, you can actually find me on my website. It's crystalballclarityofitall.com, or easily on Instagram at which is 2 E's, Crystal Fox, because there's many of us. And I will definitely get back to you there. And I pretty much post everything about the podcast and what's to come, especially for season 4 that you're going to need to catch up on by now. And that will be over there as well. So I've made it pretty easy. And then you can see all my crazy posts too that are fun.
I know I've got to catch up on season 3. That's one of the things I'm going to do this week at work. So, well, once again, everybody, that's Crystal Ball, Clarity of It All. You can find it on anywhere you find podcasts, and definitely on Instagram as well. And if you are on Clubhouse, come join Crystal and I for a variety of conversations. We are both there and looking forward to getting back into it in the new year. We're talking at the end of December. You guys are watching this in February. So at this point, we're already back on the app. So come join us. My incredible goal for this dream of my version of a podcast was just to have conversations. And I have been unspeakably blown away by the generosity of humans. And I know you have as well on the pod. It amazes me where if we just create a space for folks to tell their stories, they want to do it. And it's a real big lesson to all of us. So all that being said, pals, if you have enjoyed this conversation, please do all the YouTube-y things, like the video, subscribe, hit the bell so you don't miss a single one. All of Crystal's information is going to be in the show notes, including some direct links if you're watching this on your computer and can click around. If you are interested in starting a podcast, Crystal is a great person to talk to. So definitely make sure to get a hold of her and hear some of her tips and tricks and some of the things that she's learned along the way about the tech side of podcasting, which I know has been a consistent journey. Pals, this has been Welcome to My World. I am Dr. Kristen Donnelly. My guest is Crystal Fox, and we will see you next time. Bye.